The Lord says, because the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grievous, I will go down now and see whether they have done altogether according to the cry of it, which is come unto me. And if not, I will know. Now that last part, again, is indicative of the condescension of Christ, because I will go down now. There's condescension, okay? But I'm going to go down to see. To see what? Well, to see if the cry and sin are as bad as they say. Now we're going to come back to those words, cry and sin. They're incredibly important because they're referring to two different sides of Sodom. So hold on to those words, cry and sin. But for now, that concept of condescension in order to seek comprehension, that's mind-blowing. Omniscience doesn't want to jump to conclusions? What? You know everything. Well, true. But there's something about seeing things on ground level. There's something about coming down to experience it, to truly see it in order to truly know it. Not just is it as bad as I hear, but why is this happening? What's going on the part of the perpetrator to make them want to victimize other people? That's how sins lead to cries. We'll see that more in a moment. But I'm amazed that, again, condescension of Christ, that he would come down to do exactly that. Again, not even God jumps to conclusions. So, Jehovah, will you go down and see? Will you wrap their injured flesh around you so that you can experience viscerally, come to know intimately their experiences, the good, the bad, the everything in between? How does it feel to be a victim? How does it feel to be a perpetrator? In fact, when Elder D. Todd Christofferson was a stake president in Nashville, my old stomping grounds, he shared a story when he was stake president about a disciplinary council that he was presiding over, where a person was probably going to lose his membership in the church because he had done horrific things. However, he had also had horrible things done to him. And Elder Christofferson, President Christofferson at the time, just felt overwhelmed with, how do I sort this out? How do I distinguish between him as perpetrator and him as victim, since so often it's what we've suffered that leads us to extend that suffering to others. I've sometimes joked with students that, have you ever tried to untangle a string or an extension cord, or worst of all, Christmas lights? Horrible. And you're working at it, and you're teasing out the tangle, and you're doing all this thing, and you finally have, oh, I did it, and only to realize, no, I didn't. I cleared this part of the string, but I only pushed down the tangle elsewhere. And I worry sometimes that as far as human judgment and justice are concerned, do we sometimes only pass down the problem? Do we only move the tangle? Whereas Christ, thanks to his condescension, has assumed within himself the entire strand. He knows every tangle. And so when he untangles the life of the victim, he's not further entangling the life of the perpetrator, because he understands their situation too. Only he encompasses the entire string. And so only he can untangle it. But you servants, go down. You, my ultimate suffering servant, go down and see. So 22 and 23, they do. The men turned their faces from thence. They went toward Sodom. Meanwhile, Abraham stood yet before the Lord. And Abraham drew near and said, wilt thou also destroy the righteous with the wicked? Now, we'll see in a moment just how gutsy it was on Abraham's part to do this. I'm going to go talk to God about this. Like, wait, are you sure? Quick question. Are you planning on just treating the entire city as homogeneous, as the exact same? Because if you do, and it ends up that Sodom and Gomorrah deserve destruction, what about the righteous? Now, what we see from here to the end of this chapter is this bartering session between humanity and divinity. It's pretty mind-blowing when you really think about it. When I was in Israel as a student studying abroad in college, It's a barter economy. And so you're always haggling over things. And I hated it because I always felt like I was getting ripped off. But the way it works is you look at something and often the shopkeeper won't even tell you what he's going to charge. He just wants to see what you're willing to give because maybe you're overpricing it in your head. Anyway, you'll come and say, I'll give you 10 shekels for this. And the shopkeeper, even if it's a deal for him, will feign outrage and say, are you crazy? 20 shekels is worth. And you're like, oh, maybe he's right, but I can't just give in that easily. So I'll give you 12 then. He's like, oh, well, okay, special price for you, 18 shekels. And you're like, how about 14? Oh, 16, 15, done. Okay, so you lowball, he highballs, and you usually compromise and meet somewhere in the middle. Well, Abraham understands how haggling works. Evidently, God doesn't. Because what's interesting here, if you count them up, there's 6 rounds in this bartering session. And each time, Abraham will keep lowering things. And each time, God doesn't counter-offer. He just capitulates. He's like, okay, that's fine. So, really? Oh, how about this? And so he goes from, what about 50 righteous? If I can find 50 righteous people in Sodom and Gomorrah, will you spare the whole city? And God's like, sure. You find 50, I'll forgive everybody. Or at least prolong my judgment and justice. Okay, well, if you do it for 50, would you do it for 45? I mean, because going from 50 to 45, that's only a 10% off sale. I mean, this is nothing, right? So how about that? Oh, sure, 45 is fine with me. Okay, how about 40? Do I hear 40? Going once, going twice. Okay, no, that's good. 40 is fine. Okay, how about 30? Now he's making bigger chunks. 30? Sure. 20? Sure. 10? Fine. Wow, you really don't know how to do this, do you, Lord? Oh, he does. But I think he's saying something to Abraham and something to us about his willingness to be persuaded to be more merciful than we even imagine. I think God is saying, yes, my tender mercies, my hand is still stretched out with kindness, with forgiveness. Yes, there has to be some measure of justice. Maybe that's why Abraham stopped at 10. Even he had this sense of justice that, yeah, there's got to be some reason to turn the other cheek. There's got to be some reason to be forgiving here, merciful. But man, God is way more merciful than I ever imagined. He is. I assure you of that. We'll see that repeated over and over and over. Not just in the nice New Testament, but in the seemingly angry Old Testament. Oh, God's mercy. 10, fine. In fact, it's interesting. If you dig down into the rounds of this haggling, Abraham learns amazing things about God. We do too. Because in the first round, again, his original question is, wait, are you going to treat the righteous like the wicked and just destroy them all? And in fact, he goes down that path. He really starts arguing on their behalf. Better word, he advocates for them, which is fitting since Christ is our advocate with the Father. Oh, you want to advocate too? Awesome. That's good. That says something about you, Abraham, and your desire for mercy for other people. So yes, please advocate. And this is what he says. It's fascinating. Verse 24 and 25. Peradventure, that means, what if? Peradventure there be 50 righteous within the city. Wilt thou also destroy and not spare the place for the 50 righteous that are therein? That be far from thee to do after this manner. It's like, that's not like you, God, to slay the righteous with the wicked, and that the righteous should be as the wicked. That be far from thee. Shall not the judge of all the earth do right? It's interesting that in pursuit of God's mercy, he makes an appeal to God's justice. That's what he's pointing to start. Won't I do justice and judgment? Abraham, you're going to need to understand that. Oh, I do. In fact, gulp, I have the guts to do this. Will you be just? Really just? Because it wouldn't be just to treat the righteous like the wicked. We need to keep them separate, right? And if it's the wicked, they're the ones that deserve condemnation. If it's the righteous, they're the ones that deserve some kind of reward. So shouldn't we distinguish them? I mean, remember, creation was all about distinguishing, right? Let's separate light and darkness. Let's separate sea and land. Here, let's separate righteous and wicked. But what's amazing about this, though, is what Abraham's asking for goes beyond that. And what the Lord offers goes beyond that. Because the Lord's response in 26, he says, sure, if I find in Sodom 50 righteous within the city, I will spare all the place for their sakes, just like you asked, which is mercy, not just justice. Justice's first step would be distinguish them so that you don't end up treating the righteous as if they were wicked. But this step, this leap forward, is into mercy's realm, because now it's a matter of, in fact, I will treat the wicked like the righteous. Justice would just be to divide, separate, and treat them according to their deserts. Injustice would be treating the righteous like the wicked. Real mercy would be treating the wicked like the righteous. And I'm willing to go there. The way Jesus teaches it in the Sermon on the Mount, God causes the rain to fall on the just and the unjust. Rain's not a bad thing there. In the Middle East, rain is a very, very good thing. And it falls, it sprinkles widely to the point that God's mercy will bless the wicked right alongside the righteous. It's incredible. Now, again, there's more rounds of haggling here, and in two later rounds, Abraham says, please don't be angry. And I laugh at that because God's like, have I seemed angry at all? I keep giving in every time you ask for something. I'm not angry. But that helps explain something that Abraham does say, and this is really powerful. Verse 27, he says, behold now, I have taken upon me to speak unto the Lord, which am but dust and ashes. And in verse 31, a later round, he again says it. Behold now, I have taken upon me to speak unto the Lord. It's almost like he's doing a double take, and like he's beside himself, like looking in the mirror, like, am I really doing this? Yeah, I'm really doing this. I can't believe I'm really doing this. There's this like, who do I think I am? I'm dust and ashes, and I'm speaking to the Almighty, asking him to come in my direction a little. What am I thinking? But remember when we talked about the dust and divinity divide? And we talked about that contrary of the infinite and the intimate on God's part? We see these coming together in this bartering beautifully. Who do I think I am? I'm just dust. Yes, but you're also divine. And I know who God is. He is the infinite. Yes, but I'm also the intimate. I am willing to come down to your level. And I love, like I said before, what I'm trying to teach you, Abraham, is just how merciful I'm willing to be. I just want you to plead for me to be what I really am, because it helps you become what you really ought to be. As we advocate for one another, we recognize that even they deserve mercy, and God is more than willing to give it. I think so often we're the stick in the mud. We're the ones that are demanding retribution, and we're not quite as careful in distributing it as God would be. We don't always come down to see both sides of every story. We sometimes jump to conclusions when even omniscience refuses to do that. We can be more careful. One last thought here, though, before we move on. Again, why stop at 10? I mean, Abraham, you're on a roll. You might get this for free, okay? You might get it down to 0. Now, like I said, on the one hand, it might simply be a sense of justice on his part. There might be a pragmatic side to this as well. It might be a matter of, God's justice will not sleep forever, nor should it. But I wonder if there's just enough. Does it justify God's patience? Because if there's enough leaven, it will leaven the lump. If there's a righteous remnant, they can make a difference. So just be more patient, please, and give us time to change our culture. Give us time to meet the neighbors and begin to persuade them into paths of righteousness. And maybe with 10, that would be enough to do it. We'll see also in chapter 19, maybe 10 was a specific number on Abraham's mind. Please spare the ones I have in mind. Well, the chapter ends. The Lord went his way as soon as he left communion with Abraham, and Abraham returned unto his place. It's like, good, we agreed? Yes, well, give me your hand, let's cut the covenant, and I'll go my way, you go yours. Well, like I said, God's way was Sodom and Gomorrah. And so we turn the page to chapter 19 and we see what happens there.